Hi everyone, this is Quotidian Light, and I know this is my second video today, but I'm comfortable and my room is clean and I feel productive. So you're getting 2 videos in one day. Hope you enjoy. This video is on why I struggle with being a literary fiction writer, because I did a video the other day and I realized that it'd be really easy to misinterpret it. And I really wanted to talk about why I struggle with it, because I don't know anybody else writing literary fiction. And the people that I know who write genre fiction, they don't struggle with their genre fiction. If they write sci-fi, they're not sitting there going, oh, I should be writing romance. If they write romance, they're not sitting there going, oh, I really should be writing a thriller. But for some reason, writing literary fiction has become like this dirty word. It's not something that when you tell someone you write literary fiction, it's not seen as positive. They don't go, oh wow, that's really interesting, tell me more. It's like, oh. And I'm realizing that my own internal struggles is at least in part because I don't know anybody else writing literary fiction. And so if you are on BookTube or WriteTube, I like to call you WriteTube, and you write literary fiction, please contact me, because I literally don't know one other person that's not writing in a genre. And in some respects, it makes me feel inadequate. I had a friend that wrote me and he was talking about how a lot of the best literary fiction started out as genre and how many literary authors wrote genre to pay the bills. And I know this. This is why I'm struggling with it, because the whole reason why I decided I was going to write the series was because I need to support my literary fiction. Literary fiction isn't selling, and I thought that it would be a way, for me to practice my writing, maybe bring in a little bit of money to help me as I'm going forward with my literary fiction. And there is a long history, there's a long tradition of literary fiction writers who write genre or erotica or whatever under pen names in order to support themselves, going all the way back 20s. Like, it's old history. People have been doing this for a really long time. In addition, a lot of our best literary novels were not literary novels to begin with. They really were genre fiction. They were the beginnings of genre. And so as someone who loves literary fiction, who has read a lot of genre fiction. Like, I don't read a lot of genre now, but I have in the past. And I'm not one that's gonna not pick up a book because it's a genre book. Like, I still read probably 2 YA books a year. I probably read 2 horror novels a year. I love really highbrow horror. Love it, absolutely. To my bones, I love highbrow horror. Especially stuff that really pushes boundaries and makes you feel uncomfortable. Not so much bloody horror, but horror that kind of, after you're done reading it, you really need a shower and you really don't want to be around people. Like, I love those types of books. And so it would seem a no-brainer that I could write this series as someone that respects genre fiction and looks at genre fiction and sees so many things that they're doing right that literary fiction is not doing right now. Of course, why not write a series? So I started to write it, and I realized my heart wasn't in it. I didn't enjoy it. And it wasn't because I was trying to be this literary author that I thought I should be. No, it's because I am a literary writer, and trying to keep my ideas within genre conventions is almost painful. And as I was writing, I was realizing that I just wasn't excited by the story. Even though I could look at it objectively and see that it was a good story, I could see that they were fun characters. I could close my eyes and picture the story and see that it would make like a good TV show or a good movie and enjoy it that way. But when I sat down to actually write it as novels, I had no excitement whatsoever. Now, any other writer would sit back and go, okay, well, I guess that's just not the type of novel that I want to write. And for me, I'm really struggling with that, because there is this stigma of literary fiction, that literary fiction is dying, that literary fiction isn't going anywhere, that literary fiction is snooty, that literary fiction is dry, that it's being killed by the MFA system. There's all these preconceptions about literary fiction. And all those thoughts are on top of old tapes that I learned as a child from my classmates, from my teachers, because as a child, I read a lot of literary fiction. I was reading a lot of genre fiction too. I read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, mostly fantasy, not a lot of sci-fi, but some sci-fi. I was reading a lot of fantasy. I was reading a lot of romance. I was reading a lot of literary fiction. And because the books I was choosing were just good books, I didn't see a divide between them. And so I got teased unmercifully in school to the point where I was suicidal. I got teased for my language, for using big words, for not being black enough. I got teased for the music I chose to listen to, and I got teased for the books I read. I got teased for reading big books. I got teased for reading Shakespeare. I got teased for reading Margaret Atwood. I got teased for participating in my English classes. I got teased for all of that. And at the same time, I was being praised by the adults in school and by my mother for my voracious reading, which made the teasing worse, because then of course I would sit in class and the teacher would call on me, and that made the teasing even worse. And so I have a lot of discomfort with the fact that I love literary fiction, because I don't want to be snooty. People thought I was stuck up, and so they wouldn't talk to me, but I wasn't stuck up. I was scared of everybody. And so I have this fear that, if I'm a literary writer, does that make me stuck up? Does that whatever? And I've got that on top of all these current thoughts and ideas about modern literary fiction. And then lastly, because everybody I know is writing literary fiction, I don't have role models. I don't have a mentor. I don't have anybody that I can turn to and say, I'm editing this novel for the 15th time. Does this word work? Because everybody that I know that writes is focused on story and character. They're not really focused on language outside of, is it a grammatically correct sentence? Show, don't tell. That type of stuff. Yeah, everybody's focused on that. But when I'm writing the way that I write, I don't know anybody that's focusing on the stuff that I'm focusing on. And so I kind of feel like if I ask somebody a question, I really don't have anybody to ask questions to. I don't have anybody that I can say, I've edited this short story 18 times and I'm debating whether to use slid or glissaded in the sentence, because they're going to look at me like I'm a freak. And I think those things all combined is really what's giving me the struggle, because I'm not a literary fiction writer that's woke up one day and was like, I want to write literary fiction. I'm a writer that said, I want to write great books, tried to write genre fiction, and realized I can't write genre fiction. I'm a literary writer. And I don't necessarily want to be because I want to be a writer that people read. And I have this fear that I'm going to write this novel. I'm going to write and no one's going to want to read my novels ever. And this is all just total lame artistic insecurity. And I know it, but I do these videos because I don't really know anybody else that's talking about it. And I need to get it off my chest. And maybe I'll meet some other writers. Maybe it'll help somebody. I want to be a good writer. I want to be a good literary writer. I want to take the amazing things that are going on in genre fiction and see what parts of them can be used in literary fiction. I want literary fiction to lose this stuffy academic facade that it's built up, because it's so much more than that. It is so much more than that. And I feel like, when I say I write literary fiction, then people stop listening, even though the story might be something they really want to know. But at the same time, they still ask me the question and I don't know how to answer. And so it's really not so much a question of, am I a good enough writer? It really is an insecurity about my genre. I didn't go into this wanting to be a literary writer. I didn't go into this wanting to write the great American novel. I went into this wanting to write books and found out that I'm a literary writer. and realized after the fact that I do have an idea in me that, will be the novel that is the culmination of my life, my life's work. I didn't go into this thinking that. And so I'm kind of just wrapping my head around it and trying to figure out, like, if I'm going to write literary fiction, what am I going to do to feed myself? Do I want to be an English teacher? Like, nobody that I can think of that writes literary fiction outside of a couple authors makes a living off of their writing. None of them do. None of them. And that is scary. And that just makes me think, like, am I stupid? Am I crazy? And then when I talk about writing as an art, people, like, I don't have anybody around me that really talks about it that way. Most people talk about it as a business, because I really admire a lot of indie writers. They're doing a lot of things that I think literary writers are going to be able to use, and I'm paying very close attention to them. I'm working with the people, with the guys from Sterling and Stone, and I'm learning so much. I've learned so much over the past 2 years of following them, and I've been really watching this indie movement, and I see that it has the potential to save literary fiction from itself. But as a consequence, I'm literally surrounded by people that are writing genre fiction or approaching it from a business aspect, or when they talk about editing, they're only really talking about story and character and grammar. They're not really talking about, like, minute levels of editing. And it has built up some insecurities in me. And I'm realizing that I really do need to find a community of literary writers in order to balance that, so that I don't feel like a freak, and so that I do have someone to commiserate with, and so that I do have, people that I can talk to about the books that I'm reading or the videos I'm watching. And I haven't found that yet. There's a group in the city that I would really like to attend. It's a critique group that's really focused on literary fiction. It would be perfect for me. And it's full of people I highly, highly admire. But I'm financially broke. So getting into the city, even though it's not that far, is hard for me. That's gas, that's toll, both ways, and parking. So it's like, and honestly, that's why I want to get an MFA. Like, I can learn to write anywhere. I don't need an MFA to learn to write. Like, seriously, I could go to some island or some country where I can live on, $500 a month, and I can just dive into books and write. And 2 years of that, and I would be a good writer. I know this. But I want to get an MFA because I want to be surrounded by other literary writers that love literary fiction. And that's what I'm missing. That's the missing piece right now, because I don't know anybody that loves literary fiction and wants to write literary fiction. And so, yeah, that's where my struggle is. And I can't be the only one out there struggling with this. It's one thing when you tell people that you're going to be a writer. Like, when you say to someone, when they say, what do you do? You're like, I'm a writer. And they're like, well, what do you do for work? And you're like, well, I'm a bartender, but I'm working towards writing full time. And then they ask you what kind of books you write. Already that's got a negative connotation. But then when you say literary fiction, they really look at you crazy. If I looked at people and said, yeah, I'm going to write romance, I'd be like, oh, yeah, people buy romance. Oh, I'm going to write horror. Oh, yeah, people buy horror. Or if I were to say, I like Stephen King. If I were to say to someone, I write women's fiction, they get that. When you say you write literary fiction, they don't get that. And I think I've just hit this critical mass of getting a negative response from people every time they ask. And so, yeah, that's what I'm needing. I'm needing a community of writers. And I also think that's why I'm looking forward to this conference, because it's craft-based. It's not a writer's conference where you're doing a lot of talking about marketing and agents and publishers. It really is focused on story and making really good books. And the poetry section, they're literally writing a new poem every day. in the fiction section, we're going to be critiquing each other's work and really working on making ourselves better writers. And I think, I'm hoping that at the conference that maybe I'll make a couple contacts that can become lifelong friends. And I'm seeing the value in, the history of great writers. A lot of times when you see like really great writers, they were surrounded by other great writers. It was like little enclaves of writers, and I can see the benefit of that, because I do think writers need each other's support. You can't really get that from non-writers, because you need their support, but you also need them to be distant and go away. And other writers get that. And I see that the people that I know that write a lot of genre fiction, they have that. They either have their community in the indie world, or they have their community in the romance world or the thriller world, or whatever their focus is. They are able to build that community. And I see that they're able to support each other, and that they pull each other up. And I want that as a literary fiction writer. I would love to have, four friends, 3 or 4 friends that I could, listen to them when they're struggling with something or feeling a little insecure about, being able to market their literary fiction. And I can turn to when I'm frustrated with changing the same sentence 16 times because of one word that's just not the right word. I would like to have that kind of support. And I admire that. And I'll admit it, I'm a little jealous. I'm a little jealous of how the indie community has been able to support each other like that. And I'm still looking, like when I go online and I look for other literary writers that are online, I don't really see that same sense of community. And that's why I started the Literary Roadhouse, because I was hoping to build that kind of community. And I'm still hoping to build that kind of community. I'm hoping that through that podcast, I'll find other literary readers and maybe even some literary writers that, we'll be able to support each other and be there together. And when somebody wants to talk about a book they've read, it won't be crickets because nobody else has read it. So yeah. And I'm going to cut this short because 17 minutes again. Why is it every time I try to do this video, it ends up so long? It just ends up so freaking long. I think it's because I don't want people to think I'm struggling with the fact that I'm a literary writer. I want people to realize that I'm struggling with understanding why I'm a literary writer and accepting the fact that I'm a literary writer. I know what I write. And I like what I write. But there's some part of me that doesn't think that's okay. There's some part of me that thinks I should be writing something that's more practical, more marketable, something that more people will like, something that's less narcissistic and full of hubris. When I was reading Zadie Smith's essay on Nabokov and Barthes, and I was realizing that I am a Nabokovian reader. Like when I read a book, I don't read a book and then make of the book what I want to make of it. When I'm reading the book, I really am trying to search for what the writer was saying. And I put a lot of stock in the writer's ideas. If I'm not understanding something, a lot of times I'll go and I'll look at the writer's biography. I'll try to understand the writer more. I'll look at their influences. Like, I'm that kind of reader. But what that also does is it makes it so that as a writer, like, I feel like I have a responsibility to not just write a good story, but to have the depth and the language and to be precise and to really get my write so well that my reader can really feel what I'm feeling as I'm writing the story. And so when you think that way and then you're writing literary fiction on top of it, then there's like this feeling of, who do you think you are? And that's what I need to get past. I need to get past those old tapes that tell me that it's not okay to think highly of myself, that I'm just, Maya, and that if I want to portray some great message, that's not me being narcissistic. I need to get past those childhood tapes saying that, it's only good to read genre fiction, because if you read literary fiction, you're stuck up. Like, that kind of stuff is what I need to get rid of. And I'm getting rid of it every day. And it's an everyday struggle, and the way I get rid of it is I just keep moving on, and I dive in, and I look towards people that I admire. And even if I'm scared, I may say I'm scared, but I just keep going. I just keep going. And I write and I write, and I keep trying to write better. And I just keep going because I have a message. You know, I firmly believe that there's a good book in me, like a really good book. It's in me, and I will write it. And that keeps me going. That gives me purpose in my life. You know, if I'm not writing, I don't really have anything else that gives me purpose. You know, I attempted to write my first novel really young. Even when I was young, I had that sense that there's something in me that I need to give to the world. And so that's what I'm working on. Learning to do that and accepting the fact that that's what I want to do. So, ciao.